Okay, welcome to a Wednesday stream. We're going to be talking about Omnisphere 3 today, which was just released. And there was a lot of, I don't know, press and videos and things last week about this. It looks pretty awesome. I'm not going to clickbait you all into thinking that somehow I'm going to bash on Omnisphere. That's not really the point of this stream. The point of this stream is to talk a little bit about Alchemy, which is a tool that I have in Logic, that we have in Logic, and compare it to Omnisphere 3, because I think that there are some things that would be useful to see if we can do the same things or similar things, and talk about what Omnisphere is doing right, because clearly they put a lot of thought into this new update. And a part of this whole thing is me wondering, is this a tool that I should add to my toolkit or not? And so when we do things today, we're going to be listening to Alchemy and talking about Omnisphere, partially because as a non-Omnisphere owner, if I wanted to add it to my toolkit today, it would cost me $500, which I could, get a new Mac Mini almost for that amount. I could buy several licenses to Logic Pro for that amount, and so it's a bit of money. But there's something that really stuck out to me in all these discussions from Spectrasonics this last week, where they were talking about this new update taking 10 years of development to get to this point. And I'm thinking, 10 years. That's like if somebody bought Omnisphere 2 um, back in the day, or, I don't know the exact timeline of their releases, but they said they've been working on a lot of these features for 10 years. I mean, that's like a lifetime. Someone's career could have started and ended in that amount of time. And that's the impatience that I feel about a lot of these software developments, is when they take so long to bring features out, does it even matter at that point? Because some people, I mean, could have grown old and died in that amount of time. Jeez. But Alchemy, and let's maybe frame this how we're going to talk about it today between Alchemy and Omnisphere. We're going to talk about some of the coolest new features of Omnisphere. And first I'll say, can we do that in Alchemy or not, or some version of it? And then we'll talk about what we hope Apple and the Logic development team would do with Logic over a period of time, right? Because I think it's cool when a company innovates and shows what's possible. And I hope that others are inspired and want to make their products better as well. First and foremost, let's look at something that we have inside Alchemy. Alchemy is not something that Apple made. It was a company called Camel Audio, and I don't know the history of Camel Audio back to the beginning, if they got it from someplace else or they made it. I think they made it themselves. But Apple bought it and incorporated it into Logic and kind of rebranded it, although it looks very similar to what it looked like back then. But they've been updating it and adding some things over the course of the period of time that Apple's owned it, right? And so first big difference, the Omnisphere platform. I mean, based on what they were saying and what they've had before, has a lot more content, like a lot more presets, a lot more instruments. We're talking like by a factor of 10. They're close to 40,000, and Alchemy is close to 4,000. And so a big difference with that. Just the sheer amount of content. Now, Alchemy could have that much. That's not the issue. I mean, these are a lot of what we have here are presets and then instruments that could be imported. And of course, Alchemy could have 30 or 40,000, but nobody on the development team has ever added that content. And so that would take a bunch of time and effort to do that. That being said, I think up until Omnisphere 3, we had like a similar browsing experience, right? We have categories, subcategories, genres, and timbres inside Alchemy. These are decent. I think that we could probably use an upgrade of this, but maybe with only 3,800 presets, this is fine for that. You'll notice if I have everything set to all, their rating system is, I mean, they didn't really use it. That's really for us to use, and then we can search by that. And we can do user tags and editing. But one thing that I noticed about the Omnisphere, and let me pull open the website that they have for this. So they're really focusing on a lot of the thousands of fresh new sounds, faster access. That's great. It's curated, remastered, optimized. But it's this mutation, the patch mutation, that really benefits from that. So if they're going to upgrade their browser and figure out all of those sounds and how they sound, then a feature like mutations makes sense, where they can load up one and say, I want you to mutate this, and it knows which other patches are similar because of the way that they've curated their whole library. Well, we don't really have that so much in here. Or enough sounds to really do a mutation feature. And so that's a perfect example of something that we'll be looking at a little bit and saying, maybe if we had another 20,000 sounds and everything was really well tagged and organized, then we could have a feature like mutation, but we don't, and we can't do that. So awesome. Perfect. I really am jealous with Omnisphere of all of the sounds it has. I mean, it's just listening and seeing the organization and the categories. If any of you have used Alchemy and been like, let's go into synths, right? And I'll do analog synths, and you'll see we're down to 205 presets. Well, I'm going to click on simple. You'll see 7th player at the top. Let's see if we see this on. There's 7th player and the nice one. I mean, it's like there's a lot of overlap. Like 80s synth pop lead ends up in a bunch of these. There's 80s synth pop. I mean, it's just like, ugh. Okay. It becomes really, I don't know if their organization here is really great. But since 631 presets of all of these subcategories, and if we click on these, you'll see a various amount of them. Every once in a while, I get super excited by something here. Like if I click on vocals, I'm like, okay, let's do simple. I'm like 56 presets for one of these categories, and half of them are these choir different vowel sounds. We don't have a lot of depth in Alchemy's preset collection. I'm going to catch up on some comments for a second. Before they start adding more features, they needed to bring back certain features like being able to drag MIDI regions into the chord track. I don't disagree. Man, the chord track could use a lot of work. I've made a lot of videos about that, and I've definitely talked about that a lot. Potential for the chord track is vast, yet mostly unfulfilled. And then Stan Z says, just in case anybody forgot, Alchemy was developed by Camel Audio, and Apple just bought the company, took it off the market, and included in Logic, just like they did with Logic itself. And I did actually, I don't know if you joined after I said that at the beginning, but I definitely mentioned that this is a Camel Audio product that was purchased, not developed. But they have continued to develop it. Over the years since they've included this, it has gotten updates and changes and things pretty minor. I can't imagine. I mean, at this point, And we'll get to my list of what I wish Alchemy could do that Omnisphere can do. But I'd be okay if they just added another 20,000 presets and instruments, right? I would really like to be able to see that happening. Okay, so, and then another comment, the power of Alchemy lies with its presets morphing capabilities. This is something that Omnisphere is talking a lot about with their quad zone, or I think that's what it's called. Let me pull that up. The quad zone modulation, where they have the 4 different voices, I would say. And they're not really voices, instrument slots. And you can morph between those 4 things in different ways. And then they have the 8 different overall banks. Let's see if I can see where that is, what that's. Yeah, so if we look at the interface here, along the top, you have these 8 sections, and these are all, it's like 8 different versions of the 4 different zones. And so you can create very complex sounds. Well, this is one of those things that I was like, that sounds really familiar. I think that's like a standard instrument design kind of thing, but we have we have our global area here, and then we have our 4 different sub-banks. And each of these, this is where Omnisphere and Alchemy are very similar. Because inside each of these, we can load up a bunch of different things. We can do all of our major types of synthesis. We have sampling. I mean, it's like everything's here for the most part that's in Omnisphere. They're very, very, very similar here. We even have a morph area between the 4. Maybe it doesn't have quite as many features as the quad zone morphing that the Omnisphere has. But that's okay, because, you know, this is really just simple levels and crossfading. But as was pointed out here by Stan Stees, we have the performance pads down at the bottom, and this allows us 8 different sets of settings based on what we have on these, the knobs here, right next to that, the performance controls, and the 2 XY matrix pads there. And so we can actually create very interesting sounds that happen between these. Here's like this is like the default patch. Right? And we don't have to use the mouse to control that. If you have like the Logic Pro Control app, you can use your finger to do that. It's all automatable and controllable. This is an implementation that I still like better than what they have on Omnisphere right now. And so this section at the bottom, the performance, I think is one of the highlights of Alchemy, just like in the comments was talking about. So we have all of the morphing between the 4 sound sources, plus the performance pad with the 8 pads at the bottom. That speaks to me in a way that I don't think is quite as elegant as Omnisphere 3. I mean, this may be one of the few areas that I'm like, this is more interesting, but I really feel like that means that every single preset isn't just a single instrument. I mean, maybe this is what we're talking about in terms of the browser, right? So if I pull open any of these things, let's just find landscaping, right? So essentially what we have is one preset loaded that has 8 different instruments inside of it. And instead of having their mutation function, what we have are those 8 things that are already mutated in here. And so we can actually easily go between those mutations. It's a different way of looking at it, and I actually prefer this in some ways. They're so funny on their videos for Omnisphere when they talk about mutation. They're like, every single one of these things that you do when you mutate, it gets saved as a new preset, and so you're adding all these different presets onto your system that nobody else has. And I'm thinking, okay, great. If I mutate for 10 minutes and add 50 different things, it becomes near impossible to figure out what those were and when I found them and what they mean. I don't actually think of that as being like a way to sell me on Omnisphere, but that's just one feature of it. Let's see. Izzy says, I use both religiously. They're quite different to each other. Love Alchemy. And I think that the differences probably are in the sounds that are presented. And that's one of the things I do want to make sure I keep on emphasizing, because Omnisphere really has a lot of sounds to it. But that doesn't mean that Alchemy couldn't have all of that stuff, because I really feel like a lot of the features beyond that. So we have the effects in here, the filters, the envelopes, the arpeggiator. Almost all of the features between the two are overlapped by a lot. What's different is what was included as the preset foundation for the two. Those are very similar, are very different, like what you could include with it. Now, I do feel like there are some ways that we could get around that to a certain degree. Let me show you a couple ideas of what I was thinking in terms of, how do we increase some of the sounds and things that we're doing inside of Alchemy when it only has like a limited amount of sounds? Well, one of the biggest strengths of Logic is that we're working inside all of Logic. And so, for instance, one of the major updates that happened to Alchemy since we've gotten it is another plugin called Sample Alchemy. And so I can come over here to my loop library. We're still calling it that. The loop browser. And it has nearing what we have inside Omnisphere. It has 34,315 items. And each one of these can be used inside Alchemy to create a whole new instrument. And they made it really easy to do that. Let me just find just some random thing. Stop the playback. What we can do with this is just drag this into the empty space and bring it into Sample Alchemy. Now, Sample Alchemy is still Alchemy in many ways. But it does a lot of other things. A lot of this is actually made for a touch interface, so the Logic for iPad. Let's, for instance, turn on B here, and let's have, we'll bow these. Right, so whatever. I just make a new instrument here, all the different controls. This can turn into something really cool. But you're like, well, that's different. Well, it's still, that's actually just Alchemy with another exterior in many ways, designed similarly, because I can just come through here and just say, I want to switch that to Alchemy, and everything that we create in that one instrument and it's all playing with whatever we made on there. So every single instrument that we have, or that we create in the Sample Alchemy, is just Alchemy as well, and they all work together really tightly. So any sound I can just pull out of here, turn it into an Alchemy instrument, and then start morphing it, controlling it using the granular engine with it. So would it be useful to maybe have the library in Alchemy change so that it just includes everything? Possibly. It could. It certainly would change what it looks like in terms of the content it has. Stan Steve says, what both synths have in common for me is I don't like creating sounds from scratch with them. I much prefer Serum or Pigments. You know, that is going to be, it's like, that's funny because that's one of the points I think I was planning on getting to at the very end. Alchemy. So this is the, I don't really like, AI is a complex topic for me because I see some benefits and I see some downsides. But if they could train AI on Alchemy so it knows what everything does and the results of everything that each thing can do, and then you just had a prompt and said, hey, I would like this to have a warble sound in it that goes up and down in volume, and as you increase something it arpeggiates, like, it's like you're thinking of a sound and then it could make it all happen. That would be the best use of AI I could ever imagine, because Alchemy, while I understand how everything works on it, every once in a while they run into some of like the additive things in here that it's like, ooh, what are we looking at in terms of this like odd and even or fundamental? It's like every once in a while you're like, let me think about that for a second. But it's like I understand all of the modulation, how to use it all. It's a pain in the butt to program. There's so much with it. And that's one thing I think with Omnisphere 3, they're really trying to simplify all of the parameters that are there. And I think they're doing a good job. Their new global section, and their global section, by the way, is mapped automatically to like 300 different control surfaces. Although I'm looking around my studio here, only one of my controllers was actually on the list and all the rest of them were not. So that's a battle they're going to have to fight, keep on adding more and more different controllers. Let's see. Izzy says, what actually got me into Alchemy was the synclavier, additive synthesis, FM. The fun part comes when you add a modulation insert and let it just move gradually. That way you just focus on playing the keyboard. Cool. And there are some really cool things about this. One of my favorites in here is the envelope follower. And so you can set an envelope follower. It'll map the volume of an incoming sidechain. So I can have like the amplitude of like a drum loop controlling any parameter inside Alchemy. I mean, there's stuff like that it's very powerful. And I don't see some of those inside of Omnisphere. I see a lot of them, but not all of them. So some of the modulation stuff I think is still more advanced in Alchemy. Okay. I'm caught up with that. So another example, let's do initialize the preset here. And this is another example of what you can easily do here, but we're going to import audio. And I want to do the EXS library. So I can just come through and choose, well, let me do not that one, the sampler instruments. There we go. So any of the pianos in here, I'm going to have the mapping. Let's see. Let's do additive plus spectral. You can bring in the whole instrument. by just doing the sampler mode or the granular mode, you'll get a different version, but you can have it resynthesize an entire sampled instrument. We're going to do the unlimited, so it brings the whole thing in. And so we're going to import that in. So this is another way that I think if they would just say, let's take all of our sampled, our EXS instruments and just make them into variations in Alchemy, then we would have easily a really good library like Omnisphere. This will take a second. I just had it resynthesize an entire grand piano. I don't know if that was smart or not. While this is happening, actually, we're going to cancel it. I'm just looking at that thinking, that's going to be a minute. Let's have it just do the 4 layers. See if that goes any faster. Then checking on my settings. Okay, cool. Yeah, that is faster. So it can bring in any of the instruments. And this is just the beginning of what I was thinking, because part of the whole equation here is that Omnisphere is now trying to do more and more, and I didn't think that it was necessary. I didn't think it was necessary to add all of the new effects into it. So let's close this down. Where are there's the effects. So they have all these like little 1-rack units. I mean, I get why, because if they're inside actual Omnisphere, then they can be affected by the Omnisphere modulation engine and tied into the sounds a little bit closer. And they look interesting, but it's like you're just getting some of what each of these units should or could do in an expanded way. And so instead of getting extremely powerful things, you're getting relatively simple things. And I still am going to reach for other effects to affect my my Alchemy or Omnisphere if I was using it. But cool, they added a bunch of stuff. 35 stunning effects. Sweet. And in Logic, if I was doing something similar to that, this is almost done importing, and we'll play it for a second. If I was adding effects in there and wanted to modulate it, then I use my MIDI effects to modulate the things that are on the channel. And that, I mean, there's a lot of power in having a workstation that's handling some of these tasks rather than expecting a tool like Omnisphere to handle them. Now, Alchemy is slightly guilty of this as well, which is fine. We don't have all the graphic prettiness of it, and I actually really love that they kept some of that stuff just more plain. I don't think we always need to have like all these fancy interfaces for things. I think sometimes we just need function that sounds great. So you might be thinking, well, that doesn't sound like the original piano. Well, it's because it's been resynthesized in an additive way. But if I want to do this with Spectral, let's turn off the additive. So you get like this stuff broken down. Man, I'd love for Apple to come to me and say, hey, can you take all of our EXS instruments and make 20,000 patches for Alchemy? And I just get to spend the next like 6 months making sounds in here. because it does have a lot of power. So we have the 3 filters. Right afterwards, we have the arpeggiator, all the effects that we can add on here. I mean, this engine has a lot of stuff. Plus, we're in an additive engine. Here's the analysis. I just crashed Logic. Oh my gosh. Ignore. We just found the underbelly of Logic's weakness there. I bet you there's at least one person who's had Omnisphere 3 crash on them since they got it this week. That's just a guess. Okay, so there was one more thing with this too that I wanted to at least demonstrate something interesting about it, which is maybe the last interesting way or the next interesting way of getting sounds into it. Let's load up, for instance, the strings, studio strings. They're okay. We'll load up the singer-songwriter. They sound okay. They need to be processed pretty heavily to get a good sound, but we're going to use the auto sampler for a moment. So we can take any instrument that's MIDI controllable, and turn it into an Alchemy patch. And that involves any of Logic's ones or any third-party ones. You could actually do this with Omnisphere, which I don't necessarily recommend, but you could. Let's do auto looping. Actually, we'll just do search with crossfade. They have loop points anyway. So I'm just going to set up a basic instrument. I don't know if I can, let's see if I can mute this and it'll still work. This is strings, simple. Oh yeah, it's going to work. I just didn't want to listen to all the notes get recorded. And so now this is taking something that's not accessible by Alchemy and turning it into an EXS instrument that will be. So again, Logic has all of these sounds and instruments that could be easily turned into Alchemy patches and give us a lot of that stuff that we're missing with it right now. Another comment, I'm not a fan of the GUI of Omnisphere, especially the effects section that tries to mimic the look of analog devices. Yeah, I mean, nobody's more guilty of that than Apple in the first place. Once we're done loading this, we can load up the pedal board and have that like completely unnecessary. Makes me never want to use them because they just look stupid, and I don't need something to look a certain way. I do like things that look cool. We have what was it? There was a studio that I interned at when I was a student, had the money basket, where there was like a basket full of like auxiliary percussion. And it felt like anytime that the owner was thinking of a session was going too fast, he'd be like, go take the money basket out into the studio while they're on break. And then all the musicians would come back and see like a tambourine and like little shakers and maracas and things. And they would spend like an hour or two deciding if they wanted to add any of those onto their track. And then in the end, they wouldn't because they weren't the right things to add. But that's what it feels like sometimes. It's like, I hate that mentality of like, no, let's just focus on the music. Let's make a good experience and be efficient and not waste people's time or money. And sometimes it feels like somebody wasted our time and money by making the pedal board look like certain pedals and things. That's my 2 cents on that topic. This is auto sampling the strings. As soon as they're done, we'll load them into Alchemy and do some cool things with it. But this is the power of having things like not just Alchemy, but an auto sampler as a part of it. And I don't look at these things as separate from each other. Let's see what else they were talking about. So the hardware control, I wish Apple would do this for Logic. Take the 300 most common controllers and let us have that kind of ability instead of just the 8 most common controls in our like little smart control thing. Yeah. We do have a lot of deep sampled instruments and soundscapes, and we have in Logic, if you expand past Alchemy, then we have so many cool things as well, but it's not all in one place. And I think that's a strength of Omnisphere for sure. They really have done well with some of the cinematic things. If you're doing film scoring or video game scoring, then Omnisphere is like a great tool in your toolkit because a lot of it is all in that one place and they've spent a lot of time getting the sounds right. Let's look at the other list here. The quad zone modulation, I think we talked about that enough with the performance area. 30, excuse me. The 36 new filter types, who cares? We have so many filters and man. Like a piece of dust or something. Alchemy has at least what they're in their filter slots. I think 39 filter types. Woohoo! They're all fine. Clearly, someone did a lot of circuit modeling, saturation type stuff in Logic's Alchemy as well. I don't know. I'm not comparing those one to one. If you really need more, then you can just use ChromaGlow and have like world class modulation or modeled saturation. Okay, so that's the end. Okay, we'll come back in a second. The dual frequency shifter is one of the cooler things inside Omnisphere. Not because we don't have dual frequency shifters in Logic, but because each of those are per voice and controlled by MPE, polyphonic expression, or any sort of polyphonic control. So per note, that they said the world's first polyphonic dual frequency shifter. And as far as I can tell, I can't prove them wrong on that. Even though Alchemy has had MPE, polyphonic expression, for a number of years now, we don't exactly have that. Vintage oscillator drift, everybody has that. Fresh EDM wavetables. I mean, maybe we don't have fresh ones, but we have stale ones. Unison phase scatter. That is something that we do have unison and we have the ability to move things around, but I think it's designed a little less intelligently than the Omnisphere one. Cool. And then the classic glide modes. That's just, again, looking back nostalgic wise towards vintage equipment. And we don't have those in Alchemy or Logic, but we have the ability to glide and to adjust it, but it's just not quite a one-to-one correlation. Okay, let's go back into Alchemy for a second. So I just sampled that instrument. Let's come into Alchemy and let's initialize, import, and sampler instruments. I think we go into music. Audio music apps, sampler instruments, auto sampler. It'd be a lot easier if they would just get us there. So let's use the granular and we'll use unlimited because it won't take that long. I don't think we didn't do that many. And then we'll import. Yeah. So again, I could do this as a sampler instrument. I could do this as a granular. So there's that one. That was the granular one. Let me bring this into the B bank. With sampler as our choice. And let me turn off A so we don't get both. And so we have that instrument, first of all, and then we have the ability to manipulate it using the other tools that we have, which just gives us a lot of power in terms of what we're doing here. So B is on. Let's turn A back on. So that becomes a different instrument, but we always have the ability just to go back to the original sampled one as well. And we have all the effects that we have. We have the ability to, we're on B, or we could do main one maybe even. But we have all of these effects. And one of the things I love about these effects, for instance, we have an acoustic reverb, a classic reverb, and a convolution reverb. That's those are good options. But look at the interface. It's just business, which I love about this. We're not trying to pretend like it's all this vintage gear. Let's go to our pedal board for a second. I mean, look at these like hideous. Let's look at these. There's the tie-dye delay. Why did we need that? I don't. Maybe if you're a guitar player, you needed it. So potential is here. The potential is here for sure. And it's no, I mean, so anytime that they're like, well, you can have like 8 different instances inside Omnisphere 3, and they have the 4, the quad zone. Cool. But I don't think we were that far off from doing this. If you just make 4 different tracks out here and do a track stack in Logic, then you could have like way more than them. You know what I mean? It's like, it's all subjective and there's some marketing things, but in reality, what we have with this, with the Omnisphere 3, are the sounds. That's really what you're getting with this, because there's very few things in terms of synthesis that you can't get in a different synthesizer, either hardware or software. It doesn't matter. They're not bringing enough synthesis tools to the table that are going to make it stand out from other synthesizers. There are synthesizers out there which blow my mind and have changed how I've thought about synthesis. And Omnisphere is not one of them, to be clear. But all of the sounds, and we're talking, 30,000+ presets, that's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, the installation of Omnisphere is nearly as big as the entire Logic installation. And so we're looking at a lot of really cool things, and that is something to be taken seriously. Although I feel like that'd be it's like low-hanging fruit for someplace like Logic to catch up. Because I feel like, man, if the Logic team did nothing except for bug fixes, fix ARA, and make all of our presets way better inside of a library that's functional, then I would be happy. because seriously, all the tools we have for the most part are really usable, functional, and yet what we're missing are just a refined approach to the content that they've already given us. And so this is what pointed out. This is what I got jealous of this week when I saw this update. It wasn't all the other features. The other features are cool, but it's like we can make it work. Me personally, I use the Panorama CS12 from Nectar, and it has far tighter integration with control over logic than whatever this hardware thing for Omnisphere is. And I think most people who do a lot of work in any workstation, it could be Logic, it could be Ableton, Pro Tools, they all have their interface, their hardware controller that's doing that integration. And so for a one single plugin to add that, cool. It's cool. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not like going to change somebody's life. Cool. The new adaptive global controls is super smart way to implement it. I'm not going to lie. Still not going to change my life. Maybe if I'm playing it live, it would. The mutations, again, because they built this new library that's really intelligent, they can do that. Logic has one of the stupidest libraries ever invented. Maybe at one time it was cool, and I can navigate around it because I've used it for so long. But that's like saying, it's like building in something into our lives that's inconvenient and we get used to it later doesn't make it okay. I really think that their strongest thing are all these cool sounds. Although the blown ostrich egg, okay, you've said that you have that, amazing, cool. Let's talk about the other ones. They just they're really impressed with themselves that they have an ostrich egg instrument in there. The effects, I could care less about because I just don't think that it's not the value that they're trying to do. And now they're saying we're going to give you all these as an effects rack. Again, cool. So let me see if there's other things here. The fully redesigned browser, extensive implementation of subcategories, new directory tree. I mean, that's all the same thing. New hide function. Okay, yeah. So those are all just library things. And then that's it, really. They're obviously, they've been working on this for a decade, they said. There's going to be more than that. These are just like the highlights. This is not a piece of software to sneeze at. It looks amazing. And of course, I've heard Omnisphere used, and I've used it in various places. I don't have it in my home setup, or otherwise we'd pull it up. But I'm not going to be spending $500 on it. After looking at everything and thinking about it, I could, when I need to, East-West, their Composer Cloud that has sounds out the wazoo, full orchestras, choirs, weird sounds, cool sounds, vintage sounds, for $19 a month or something. Or it's like I have the entire, I use Reason rack and it has so many sounds on it. I don't necessarily need Omnisphere right this moment for anything I'm doing. And so $500 is a lot to do that with. But somebody who uses Omnisphere on a day-to-day basis in all of their work, I can imagine them upgrading it for sure. Another comment, mainly produce hip-hop and synthwave. And for me, Omnisphere never had any sound that suited those aesthetics. I could see that. What were you saying you use? Was it Serum that you said you use? I'm going back through the comments. Yeah, serum or pigments. And actually, there's another instrument that I want to really dive into in a video at some point that I was given that I love very much. Phase plant, is that what it is? From Kilohertz. Oh my gosh, this thing. This thing speaks to me in a way that I wish Logic had an instrument like this. I don't know how many presets they have. But they have. Ooh, let me turn that down just a little bit if that was loud for me. This thing, the way that this is a modular instrument, so you have all these like sound sources that you can route, and then they have all their effects that they can route. This thing is something that scratches all of my nerd inclinations. I need to do a video about it. I think it looks like there might be an update I can download. But the Kilohertz team, that's the thing. This is a team that's not doing things over 10 years, but I was blown away that they're like, it took us 10 years for this. I talked about it at the very beginning of the stream, but it's not, it's a long time. That means you can count on Omnisphere 4 in 2035. Another comment, our Arturia V collection is what I use for a retro analog synth. Phase plant is great as well. I just don't want to learn another synth. Seriously. Ugh. Isn't that the truth? Who has time to learn all these things? I do spend a lot of time learning things. I didn't compare Omnisphere to any of the other instruments in Logic, although I probably could have on certain ways. By far, and I've made videos about this many times in the past, but sculpture is one of the reasons I stay in Logic. This is an instrument that if you said, hey, Professor McGuire, can you make this sound? And it's a certain type of sound, but it's like I can tell you right off the bat if it would work or not. I go to this instrument if it can do it, because this instrument, I love everything about it. It didn't take a long time to learn because it really functions like an acoustic instrument. And so it makes a lot of sense how it works. Okay. I think we've covered mostly what I was hoping to do today. Thanks everybody for watching. There's been a good group on here. I know some of you are just listening and not talking, but it's been awesome to just talk about some of these things that I've been thinking about. I think Omnisphere 3 looks great. I actually have written them and said, hey, send me a copy so I can do like a full actual comparison on my channel. And I'm not hearing anything back from them. That's okay. They're in the middle of a busy release week. And yet I hope they do, because $500 is not something I'm going to buy a software instrument for and then make a video on it and then just never use it again. That's not very practical in any way. And then Stamina MC says the value proposition of a synth like Omnisphere is a very individual thing. Can Alchemy compete with it? My answer would be no, but whether it needs to or not is where my head's at. And so I don't disagree, but I do think Alchemy could compete with it. It's just not currently competing with it, if that makes sense. I think it has most of the same features. I just think that the strength of Omnisphere is in the library that it has, and nothing in Logic is competing with that currently. if that makes sense. Okay, thanks everybody for watching. We're going to pull the plug on this one. And we'll be doing more content coming up soon. So thanks for watching. Talk to you later.